This episode of Reading Trek is brought to you by our patrons. You too can support this vibrant, fan-based podcast network by visiting patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. For as little as $1 a month, Patreons gain exclusive early access to some of our unedited shows, interviews, and even get to join in exclusive Patreon-only chats. We have lots more Patreon content on the way, so you won't want to miss it. So visit patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. Be sure to mention that Reading Trek sent you.
Put down the remote, set your phaser to stun, and pick up that paperback.
You do have books in the 24th century.
Welcome to episode 8 of Reading Trek, a Star Trek book club podcast and proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. My name is Marty Ali, and I am joined once again by my wonderful co-host, William Conlon. Will, how are you doing today?
I am, as you just said, I am wonderful. That's a very nice intro, Marty. I think you're wonderful as well.
Oh, thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, busy at work. We were busy at WonderCon, which we talked about on Shore Leave.
Yeah, go check out that Shore Leave.
Busy month all around. You've been busy with your documentary you're doing. I know that's putting you through the ringer.
Oh boy, but it's all fun. I got to spend a day with Guillermo del Toro last week, which was a dream come true kind of thing, because he is, Mr. Movies, and, just so much fun to chat with. So, yeah, go online, check out Making Apes. It's a documentary I'm working on. A lot of Star Trek people in it, Michael Westmore and people who worked on the Trek films.
I can't wait to see it. But we are here to talk about Star Trek novels. Will, what novel are we talking about today?
Wow, is that a book?
Today's novel is Star Trek Invasion: First Strike by Diane Carey. For those who are new to the podcast, we are a book club podcast working our way through the Star Trek expanded universe one novel at a time, discussing the characters, plots, writing, and piecing it together into the larger Star Trek universe as we pull out the meanings and messages of the text. Although we do encourage you to read along with us, the show is designed to give all Trek fans a way to journey through the EU together, even if you haven't read the books. Before we dive into this week's novel, we want to take a moment to discuss our voicemail contest. Reading Trek is holding a contest, and you can enter to win a brand new hardbound copy of The Autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard by David A. Goodman. To enter, all you have to do is call us at our voicemail at 609-512-5527 and leave us up to a 2-minute message with your thoughts on the show or something you've been reading. With that said, let's get to today's selection.
That's the book. I know it's a book. The book.
So as Will mentioned, we are talking about Star Trek Invasion: First Strike by Diane Carey. It's the first in a series of 4 novels in the Star Trek Invasion series that will take us on a journey with all of our crews. But where and when does this first novel take place, Will?
The question isn't where we are. It's when we are.
Alright, First Strike takes place in the year 2267, the 3rd year of Kirk's famous 5-year mission. So let's give our readers a warning from this point out. We have spoilers for First Strike. Black alert.
Black alert. Black alert.
Marty, would you be so kind as to turn the page and give us the plot summary for First Strike?
Klingon General Kellen of the IKS patrol ship Jada and his crew are on a routine patrol mission when the nearby sun begins to expand and the mass of everything in the system begins to drop. Barely escaping the chaos, the crew observed a ship coming out of a rift in space that formed when the planetary system went haywire. Kellen tries to transport to his warship, but the beam was redirected to the new ship. Walking through the foggy ship, Kellen notices the walls are covered with moss and skulls. He sees a creature coming out of the moss with snake-like hair. It looks just like one of those demons of Klingon legend. The Jada beams the general back where he tells his crew that the legends are true. The demons are coming back for them. Meanwhile, Kirk and his crew are in a firefight with a group of Klingons over a land dispute on a planet native to Capellians. General Kellen ends the fight by arriving in orbit and asking for Kirk's help, but not before Spock is seriously injured. Hearing of Kirk's success in battle, Kellen asks Kirk for his help to take on the havoc of Klingon lore. They beam back up to the Enterprise, as Spock is placed in an anti-grav unit so his back can heal. They meet up with the mysterious ship as Kirk and crew beam over to meet the captain. They discover that his race was relocated from their home, castaways the unclean, and they have come back to retake their home. Kirk invites the captain, Zenor, and the religious leader, Gira Manis, along with few other members of the alien crew, to come aboard the Enterprise to research together and find out if this is in fact their home. Once on board, Kellen begins to get impatient with Kirk's talking and takes action. He kills a security guard and cuts off the head from one of the visitors, then beams back to his fleet, showing them the proof that the Havoc have come to destroy them. After the body was discovered, McCoy performs an autopsy on the poppet that all the alien crew carry, unknowingly offending them. Spock, still in the anti-grav unit, has completed his research and discovered that this section of space is indeed the aliens' home. He named them the Furies after the name described in Greek mythology. Garamanis discovers this new proof and steals the data along with McCoy and heads back to his ship after sending a transmission to the fleet waiting on the other side of the rip in space. A huge ship comes through the rip and joins the Wrath. Kirk and his crew, with the help of Zenur, beam over to rescue McCoy and retrieve the stolen data. They're able to rescue McCoy just before he's burned at the stake and beam out before getting the data. Zenur finds the data and launches an attack on the Enterprise after realizing that this is indeed their space. The Klingon armada starts attacking the Wrath as the Wrath seems to absorb the energy, taking no damage. Suddenly, and without warning, the Wrath lets out a powerful burst of energy at the Klingon fleet, crippling them. The Klingon fleet is mostly disabled after their first strafe, as the Enterprise watches from a safe distance. Kellen's flagship loses power and is on a collision course with another battle cruiser. Kirk orders the Enterprise into the battle zone to attempt a rescue. As they approach Kellen's ship, the Wrath open fire on the Enterprise, severely damaging the bridge. With systems down, the Enterprise watches one of the Klingon ships collide with the Wrath. The collision peels back several petals of defensive armor and leaves an exposed subsection of the ship vulnerable. Kirk opens ship to ship with Kellen and demands command of the Klingon fleet. Kellen gives Kirk command, but Kirk attempts once more to reason with Zenur, who declares an all-out war on the Alpha Quadrant. Seeing no other option, Kirk orders all Klingon vessels to fire on the Wrath, causing a power overload which will consume the ship. With the Enterprise's warp drive offline, it is Kellen who manages to save Kirk and the Enterprise by extending their shields over both ships just before the sector is engulfed in flames. As the Enterprise and Klingon fleet recover from the battle, a small pod is discovered in the Wraith's wreckage, containing all stuffed poppets, which represent the souls of the Wrath's crew. Kirk orders the pieces cataloged and preserved as a token of goodwill in the event the aggressors return. Spock deciphers a communication sent from Zenur to his people at inconceivable speed of warp 25, stating that the battle is lost, but they should try again. To be continued.
Dun, dun. Nicely done, Marty.
Thank you. My throat hurts a little now after all that
Yeah. Well, one of these days we're just going to have to do the extended audio book.
Right? I mean, we're almost there.
Yeah.
Only a few hundred pages short.
Well, I tell you, I have so many notes from this book. This was a real page turner. What were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts, again, I love this book. I agree with you. I thought it was a real page turner. I didn't want to put it down. But I think my favorite little silly moment when McCoy has to take communications, and he's just pressing at buttons, not knowing what he's doing.
Yes, do you know that famous Star Trek meme, aggressive button mashing?
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's a
surprisingly.
shot of McCoy just hitting buttons, and the subtitle on it says aggressive button mashing. I kept thinking about that whenever it went to McCoy at Uhura's spot.
Must have been written for that moment.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see how many of the primary bridge crew kind of go in and out of commission in this book, because you have, Sulu goes out of commission, Spock is out of commission, Chekhov seems to get the crap beat out of him.
I thought it was interesting. There wasn't very much of Sulu, if at all, in this book. Spock is in sickbay for most of the book, but it did give us a chance to highlight some of these lesser seen characters, like Lieutenant Byers, or is it Ensign Byers?
I think it's Lieutenant, and I actually had to look up on Memory Alpha to see if he was somebody established on the series, and I don't believe so. I believe he is created just for the book, and I think when it's that seamless, that's a great representation of a good Star Trek novel, because you're thinking somebody fits within the universe that you know so well visually.
Yeah, well, there were so many background bridge cast on the Enterprise anyway. Could have been any one of those, but he was one of my favorite characters of the novel, actually, and he was only there because the main bridge crew was injured. But he was my favorite character because I thought he was doing his best under the extenuating circumstances, and I felt like I really related to him because, if I was a crew member aboard the Enterprise, I probably would not be in one of those lead command positions, but would probably be the guy good enough to take over in an emergency.
Yeah, well, you know who he really, really reminded me of was Lieutenant Bailey in one of my favorite TOS episodes, the Corbomite Maneuver. He had that same kind of, new to the bridge, doesn't really belong there. Kirk is giving him a lot of leeway because he knows that, and they're going up against this massive ship that is obviously overwhelming to them. So I drew a lot of immediate comparisons between this book and Corbomite Maneuver.
Yeah, that's a good parallel there.
Well, I really liked the character of General Kellen. I thought he was a great Klingon character because you don't often see a Klingon character as reserved as he is. He's known, the quote is, he had long ago discovered the best key to winning: when the situation becomes tense, become correspondingly calm. So we have a Klingon who doesn't seem to go with that same aggressive nature, and through the course of the novel, he's kind of mentally brought down to that crazy aggressive Klingon nature, but he still maintains his composure better than, Kor or another Klingon that we know so well from TOS probably would have.
Yeah, he definitely is not. He's not a crazy gangster Klingon like most of them are. I did love him in this book. I think his best moment is when he is talking about humans in general. Kellen spoke before Spock had a chance. Recommendations. The great shipmaster asked for recommendations. The Cavalier of Starfleet asked of his subordinates what to do. The Federation's headmost Uphelmer parries to rear and mocks the wrath faith given to him by those he flies before. Recommendations. Clearly, the stories that come back to my people of Starfleet's agronaut will be different after today. He gestured to the deck, and his feet added, "The arrogant falls before me."
Yeah, he's a complex and interesting character, and
he's one of the most complex Klingons I think I've ever encountered.
Exactly. I mean, the Klingons of TOS are so theatrical and above the top, and I think
they're like Shakespeare actors.
Exactly, yeah, and I think he really lends a great calming factor to a overbearing character race.
Yeah. Did you picture them in your head more as the T and G Klingons or the TOS kind of bad makeup Klingons?
I actually made a mental effort to picture the bad makeup ones because I wanted to visualize this book shot in the style of 1966. I wanted to see, I thought of like the lighting on the bridge and Shatner's fantastic melodramatic acting when they talk about him like, lashing his hands out, talking to them, like, Kellen, listen to me. I have a solution. I envisioned Shatner in the role, and it
was
makes
written
it so
really
much
well
better.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was, and that's why I'm really excited to go back to the entire series, because each of the different Star Trek series was shot in its own special way.
They each had their own tone. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to, because I don't remember. I mean, I remember the plots, but I don't remember the details as to whether or not the Next Generation book feels like the Next Generation and Voyager feels like Voyager. So
we'll probably find out.
Yes, we will.
So one of those moments you were talking about. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Early on in the book, Kurt canted forward slightly enough to get across his "Do I have to keep asking?" expression. And I could picture like exactly what moment that was. Just this kind of where he cocks his head a little bit.
Yeah, and I have one highlighted here too, where he said it's during the battle on Capella 4, where he says, "Gentlemen, I think I finally reached my limit." They both looked at him, and Spock asked, "Sir?" "I'm sick of Klingons."
I love that. That's a great moment.
So I want to talk to you about that battle. Is it just me, or was that battle just ultimately brutal compared to TOS battles that we saw on screen?
Oh yeah, it was way more violent than we've ever seen on TOS.
We had a character get stabbed in the spinal cord. Spock got thrown off of a cliff. An entire squadron of red shirts got vaporized in one instant. That was a crazy battle.
Maybe it's one of those things. It's like we couldn't do it on the show, but we can do it in the book because we're not limited to budgets, ratings, or censorship.
Yeah. And I thought it was really intriguing that they were able to dive into the aftermath of the battle by showing that scene in the morgue with McCoy, and that was an intense, a tense little scene for McCoy to talk about having to bury the Starfleet officers in space. And I know we're bouncing around a little bit, but the battle relates to that he had a morgue full of dead bodies, which is something we obviously never saw on TOS. We saw that in TNG with Crusher once. But I thought that just was really an exposing scene for McCoy. Yeah, so Marty, what did you think about the general intensity of this book as opposed to TOS as a TV series?
I definitely thought it was more intense in the action and more tense in the drama. I thought there was a lot of depth to all the characters, especially Kirk. Kirk had a lot of depth in this book. McCoy, I got moments from McCoy in this book that I never thought I would see in the show. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is definitely got that TV show vibe, but it takes it a little bit further. I loved it.
Yeah, there was a line during the battle that I really liked. That was kind of a Kirk moment. That was he was looking out at his officers or his crew fighting for their lives, and he said, "They knew their duty, and Kirk knew his. It was the captain's bravery that made men face the enemy again after fighting all morning. The message in this manner, that he would not only fight with them, but for them, that made them rather die fighting than scrambling. Safety no longer had flavor. None asked himself any more the lurid question, 'What am I dying for?' The question had an answer, not for this distant herd of unfriendly people, nor for this speck of land and the speck in the sky. What am I dying for? For the captain. Why? Because he would die for me."
Yeah, that was a great line. Oh, this book's so well written. There's moments like that all over the place.
Yeah, huge hat tip to Diane Carey, who I assume has written other Trek novels, and she has written quite a bit. Yeah, okay, yeah, she's got a huge Star Trek history here, so that's great. Dozens of books by the look of it.
She's no stranger. So, Kirk under stress equals Kirk is a jerk. There are so many. Let's talk about Kirk for a while, because he's one of the more interesting characters of the book. He seemed a little more snappy with the crew.
It reminded me of the episodes where you had Kirk under intense duress. You had Corbomite maneuver, you had Balance of Terror. So ones where he's in kind of those no-win situations that he's known for. I think that, he tends to get a little short with his crew.
Yeah, but we did have some really great Kirk moments. One of them is when he is snapping at his alien visitors because they are fighting amongst each other. Xenor, back off, Kirk called, disappointed that a struggle and a quest that had gone on for millennia now apparently came down to a physical fight between leaders of two factions. He always wanted things to be loftier than that, and so often complex circumstances came down to shows of muscle, driven to victory or failure only by the intensity of belief driving them.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really strong Kirk moment there. Another one is towards the end of the book. The best crew in Starfleet didn't mean they were icicles. He regretted not coming up with a word or two of shallow comfort. They needed to hear that in his voice, but he had none. The only gift he could give them was that they would die while saving others.
And I think there's some really great direct lines to classic Trek episodes in here that can reinforce the points in the novel. In Chapter 9, when Kirk and McCoy are talking about the aliens on the vessel, they're trying to figure out why there are similarities and they seem to recognize them, and the conversation is, "It is the similarities to us you're reacting to," the Doctor scowled. "Pardon me? The scariest aliens are the ones who are distortions of ourselves. We look at them and see something vaguely familiar. An upright silhouette. The same kind of movements, arms, legs, mouths, an eye or two, a verbal language. Aliens like the Horta or the Melkots aren't as frightening because they're so completely unlike us. It's those like Xenor and his crew that shake us up, and all because we see a glaze of something we recognize that's been stretched out of shape. Once we get over that, we can look at the similarities for what they are." McCoy folded his arms and canted his heads. "That's what's different about you, Captain." Kirk looked at him. "About me? I don't follow." "Yes," the Doctor sighed. "No matter how far out we go or how much space separates us from somebody else, you always see how we're alike instead of how we're all different." And then shortly after that, there's a reference to when they're talking about the Conquerors, and Kirk says Conquerors to them could elicit the same reaction as Kodos the Executioner does to us.
We got our Kodos reference.
Kodos reference, oh yeah. No, I just thought it was great that they connected it to those classic Trek episodes, because those are some of the episodes that set up the backbone of what Star Trek is. As he says in Corbomite Maneuver, "The face of the unknown, I think you deserve a look at it."
Jim, don't you think...
What's the mission of this vessel, Doctor? To seek out and contact alien life.
And an opportunity to demonstrate what our high-sounding words mean. Any questions? I'll take 2 men with me.
Dr. McCoy, to examine and treat the aliens if necessary.
And you, Mr. Bailey.
Sir?
The face of the unknown. I think I owe you a look at it.
Yes, sir.
Captain, request permission to...
Denied. If I'm wrong, if it's a trap, I want you here.
That is one of my favorite lines of the original series. "The face of the unknown, I owe you a look at it." I mean, that is like one of the classic Kirk lines.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, it's kind of the spirit of Star Trek, too, if you think about it. Back to the moment you just read, I had that same thing highlighted, but I highlighted it as a standout McCoy moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it is for both of them, yeah.
If there's anything I like more than a good Kirk speech, it's a good McCoy speech, and that was definitely a good McCoy speech.
The green-blooded hobgoblin. And there's also a moment that I want to highlight, too, of Xenor's, because I think Xenor is an incredible study in character of somebody who goes from one side of the spectrum to the other in a short period of time, because his beliefs are so solid and then so abruptly exposed. You know, he's from the faction of that clan of aliens that believes that they are the interlopers and that this isn't their space and they shouldn't be doing it, and then he finds out, sure enough, that he is. But at the point where he's still defending Kirk, he has this impassioned moment, and I just really love this. So the quote is, Zenor stepped between them, raised his long clawed hand to Kirk, but turned to face Garamanus again. Are these our conquerors, the drooling, snarling visions of evil you have held up to us for generations? Every essence of meanness and torture, delighted in agony. Why do you not admit you are wrong? The stars are not here. The proof is not here. The crew will be against you when I show them this. We have come to find evil and found the opposite. Can we fail to grow? He paused, waiting to see if Garamanus would speak, and when the Dana did nothing but stare, Zenor gestured again to Kirk. We tell the Conqueror we come to drive him out. He offers us sanctuary. We are damaged. He offers repair. We are attacked. He defends us. We tell him we have no home. He offers to make room for us. Garamanus Drovid, Dana of the Wrath, keeper of the magic eggs and the gold sickle, call upon your wisdom and not just your research and tell me, is this our Conqueror?
Oh my gosh. This book is so beautifully written.
It's Star Trek Shakespeare. It really is.
It's like modern Shakespeare. It's so eloquent.
If that character hadn't found those holotapes, then that ship would have been joined by the Federation. It would have been a part of the Federation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They would have been welcomed in. There's another... Speaking of the aliens, since we're talking about the Fury, we get some really great backstory on them. Alright, I'm going to read a little bit of backstory about these aliens.
Please do.
5,000 years ago, there was a war between two developed interstellar civilizations. When the war ended, one civilization lay in defeat. The survivors of the vanquished, many races from many planets, were banished to far distant place in the galaxy, relocated well away from the visitors, dropped in the barren middle of nothing with nothing. No technology, no science, no supplies. Many millions perished in the first few decades. The civilization fell apart, fell back into barbarism, splintered, regressed to the primal. There were plagues, wars, and ultimately a massive extended period of dim, raw survival. As they began to crawl out of this 1,000-year dimness and to populate 3 of the planets to which they were banished, a belief emerged about another place, the home space, where they were meant to be. As society and science clawed upward again, the splintered, spurned, began to draw together under one common belief. The belief has become the driving force of our culture as we evolved once again to high technology. Because of the 1,000-year dimness, there are no records with facts of locations, but only words passed from descendant to descendant. On the parent's knee, every offspring learns of the Fury to regain our place. It is our unifying purpose to reach out and repossess the section of space from which we were evicted. We are the unclean, the out-of-grace, ill-burdened castaways, with the Fury in our minds, disowned and cast down, thrown together by our collective loss of war, with only one thing in common, one singular commitment to find the way back. It is a culture-wide investment, and we are here to spend it.
That is great. How can you describe an entire culture in just a few pages? That's how.
It's 3 paragraphs. 3 paragraphs of text.
It's brilliant.
And it's a beautiful backstory. Reminds me a little bit of Battlestar Galactica.
That's true. Oh man, I didn't get that one. That's a good comparison.
Yeah. And Battlestar Galactica, we're rooting for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a very complex villain.
Yeah, I never got the Battlestar Galactica comparison. That's a great comparison, and I agree with you 100% because I kept reading this and thinking, if this book was written a slightly different way, then the aliens could be the protagonists of this, and Kirk could be the antagonist.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I thought when I read that passage.
And I also, because there's also, for the majority of the book, you think that they're going to end up being allies of the Federation. I think it's very powerful when he says, when Zenor says, if it comes to be proven that we are not in our space, we will destroy the Klingons for you. The grin fell off Kirk's face, and he almost heard the crunch. I can't sanction that. But if they are conquering, they must be stopped. Why would you allow them to continue? And Kirk thought, oh, tempting.
Oh, yeah. So good.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine somebody offering to just wipe out your worst enemy, and you're just standing there going,
There's another moment with them that make it seem like the story could be flipped. I'm glad that you found enough or enough lack of information to convince you we're not our enemies. Zenor's weighty hand bowed slightly out of the shadow. I am convinced not by what we have found, but who we have found.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if that's not a TNG story, I don't know what is.
Yeah, this is it. One of the tragedies of this book is the fact that Kirk and Zenor could have been great allies.
I think they could have been good friends, even.
Yeah, it just felt like that, and it's tragic.
The first Fury in Starfleet.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a minute. I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the religious weight of this book, and what this presents as far as humanity goes, because one of the core tenets of the Federation, of course, is the Prime Directive, and what this book basically poses is that Klingons, Vulcans, Andorians, and Terrans all had their cultures contaminated at an early state by aliens, which is the prime goal that the Federation attempts to avoid. So what kind of implications does it have that these aliens contaminated Earth's culture during the times of the Druids, the ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Romans?
Oh, I didn't think of that. That's really interesting. Wow, that's a great parallel to the Prime Directive that I didn't pick up. It's interesting because now, whenever Starfleet breaks the Prime Directive, like, this could be the result, like, centuries down the line.
Mm-hmm. Think about the episode, and I don't know the name of the episode, but when Kirk is on the planet with the Native Americans, the kind of Native American style aliens, that is a considerable culture contamination there.
Yeah. Or the time that Riker was undercover, and he had to,
Yeah. There's a lot of great examples in Trek of it, and then also, not to cause groans across the universe of Trek fans, but there's an episode of The Orville last season that dealt with this directly that I thought was extremely powerful, when the character of Kelly goes down to a planet and ends up contaminating it at kind of a Roman Empire level, and then the planet, instead of the people, the planet starts traveling forward in time, and they see the repercussions on that planet for thousands of years.
No groans here. That was one of the best episodes of The Orville.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I just kind of, we're a Trek podcast, but The Orville is very, very close to Trek. We're right on the cusp. All it needs to be done is Star Trek Orville.
Yeah, basically, and a trip into the Federation.
No, yeah, so just to digress a little bit, back to what we were saying about Kirk and Zenor, there's a line that McCoy says in there that I think it's McCoy that says, when Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are talking about Zenor, McCoy says, "Figured you'd get on so well with the devil."
Yeah, that was really funny. Speaking of funny moments, there's a moment with Lieutenant Uhura. I don't know if you picked it up, but I certainly did. Fine. Kirk turned away and looked at Uhura again. I need a linguist. Do we have one on board? Yes, sir. Me. You? Her almond cheeks rounded in a smile. What do you think communications means? Small talk?
I love that, because, Uhura didn't get a lot of good back talk in the original series, and
she got to smack talk in here.
Yeah, because she's a badass in the movies, but in TOS she's very timid, and this is kind of that bridge in between.
So now she is really sassy the whole time. So
I'm going to keep saying it. I'm just in awe of how great a book this was.
Yeah, it was really good. There was one moment though that I did have to question. It's near the very end in the big battle. The Enterprise went up on a side, almost 90 degrees. The crew tumbled, but they knew what to grab for and managed to pull themselves into place as the deck began to right. Question. We're in space. The center of gravity is the Enterprise's floor. With the grav plating
going haywire. Yeah, the grav plating was going haywire. Yeah, I know.
As the ship is going 90 degrees and bowing to the right.
Let's talk about two major pieces of Trek tech. The fact that the gravity plating can cause people to go flying into walls, and the fact that every single computer console has an explosive device built into it.
Yes. Just a terrible design, don't you think? Well, my question was, and this is just something like, taking spaceships and making them into fighter jets. Like, it just doesn't. Or like a cruise ship, They're on a cruise ship and it bowed. But in space, nothing's pulling on you except whatever gravity you have in your craft. So if the Enterprise went up 90 degrees, the crew wouldn't fall back. They wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or if you lost central gravity, you would just start floating.
Instead of getting slammed across the other,
Yes, I do. Moving right along.
You don't like to think about these things too hard, do you? I need a Trek not a Trek podcast. I have a Trek podcast. I need a tech podcast to talk about all these contradictions in technology.
Yeah, and you and I were texting earlier. We were talking about the theory of phaser fire dissipating in space because it's pure energy moving at light speed. So you assume that it wouldn't dissipate until it makes contact with an object.
Where does it go? Where does it land?
You fire a phaser at a Klingon ship. It misses the Klingon ship, and then 3 years later, and 10 light years away, there's just this small village on a planet, and it gets hit with a phaser blast, and everyone screams and dies.
Yeah. And then you blame it on someone else, and
Yeah, nobody fired that. I didn't fire that. Nobody signed that.
Do you think they have to fill a form out for every phaser blast that didn't hit a target? Just like, oh, we lost a phaser blast at this location.
That'd be
Keep
funny.
An eye out.
That'd be funny if that was a Starfleet Corps of Engineers gig. They have to go around capturing all the phaser fire. Oh crap, what did you get this week? I'm on phaser capture duty.
No. Oh my god, that'd be so hilarious if that happened. I want to read all those books now.
Which ship was it? I was on the Enterprise. Oh god, we're going to be at it for weeks.
Oh boy.
That Chekhov's got an itchy trigger finger.
Although it sounds like, if you watch TOS, that it takes a lot of energy for a phaser to fire. And even in
they deplete the banks a lot.
Even in the last book we covered, there had to be someone in a phaser room aiming and firing the phaser. So it takes a lot of manpower and energy to fire those things. I don't think they're just throwing them out there willy-nilly. Yeah,
that's true. The other tech thing that I want to talk about, it's not really a tech thing, more of like a construction thing, but there's a moment where the bridge gets hit pretty hard, and there's a small fissure, and they can hear the air hissing out of the bridge, and they're starting to going to start shutting down lower decks to divert energy to the bridge. Did that remind you at all of the bridge of the Shenzhou during the Battle of the Binaries when the wall gets blown out and Philippa is just kind of staring at the opening of space with the force field?
Incoming warship on attack vector. They've locked onto us.
Divert all power from non-essential systems to the aft shields.
Yes, Captain. Emergency force field is holding. But shields and impulse engines are offline. We're completely disabled.
They're still coming. Right behind us, weapons hot.
I didn't think of it until just now, but that's exactly the same scene. That's great.
Because that is one of my favorite moments in the Battle of the Binary Stars, when the bridge gets hit and she's just kind of staring at that with her hair blowing in the wind and that's getting sucked out of it, and she's just staring at it with contempt. Kind of reminded me of that when Kirk was looking up at the ceiling, where's the fissure up there, because I know it's sucking my ship dry.
Oh yeah, totally. There was also my personal favorite, rocks falling from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Could visualize that in my head as Kirk sat down on, shrapnels and whatever else was on his chair. He just brushed them out of the way.
Yeah, you'd think if they have anti-gravity, they could set it so that the ceiling doesn't fall on the people.
Yeah. Or where do they get the rocks?
Just saying, Starfleet.
The ship from hell was a hell of a ship.
Yeah, oh, I love the description for it right at the beginning, too. In the first chapter, it says, this alien vessel was the length of their entire fleet, that's the Klingon fleet, 6 ships laid back to tail and shaped like a corkscrew. Great fans of black and purple hull material fanned out and overlapped each other in a spiral against each other, arcing forward like welded petals to a point. There was no top or bottom, no visible bridge or command center. Seeming almost to flex its way through space, it was constructed perfectly to screw through that opening out there.
Yeah. What a cool description.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really just... I mean, this book is so...
I want the Eagle Moss version of that ship.
Yeah, oh, wouldn't that be great? And then you imagine when the Dreadnought section attaches to it, you can think of the sheer size of that compared to the Enterprise. It almost reminds you of the scene in Into Darkness when the Kelvin Enterprise goes up against the Vengeance for the first time.
You know what they should do? Eagle Moss should send you the first part of the ship, and then as an XL edition, they should have the remainder of the ship, and then you could clip the big ship and the little ship together to make... I would love it. I'd buy it. I'd pay $40 for it.
One of the things that I really like is the sense of duty, too, that comes from Kirk when he's talking to, I believe, let's see, the quote is, he's talking to Garamanis, I think, where he says, according to the laws of space travel, it befalls you to anticipate the effects of your ship's passage. So they're saying that they are sorry that they caused the spatial rift that destroyed an entire solar system and killed billions of people. But when Kirk is saying, hey, sorry isn't quite enough here.
Yeah. There's definitely more to be held accountable for destroying a solar system.
And on that note, there's a very powerful section in that first chapter where Kellen envisions the people on that planet. It's like a pre-industrialized planet, and he watches that planet thinking, imagine somebody who's just living there, and then all of a sudden their planet breaks apart around them, and they're like zapped into warp speed, and they're conscious while it's happening.
Oh, can you imagine? That'd be awful.
I mean, that is a horror movie in its own right, that entire scene.
Oh, such a good book.
This is, it's extremely powerful. I hope we're gonna have to look this up. I hope Diane Carey is on Twitter because we want to tweet out some praise
definitely.
for her. And it also should be noted there's a little spot on the bottom of the cover because it says the concept of Invasion, this entire 4-book series, was designed by her and John J. Ordover, who I don't know if he had anything to do... No, he didn't have anything to do with the other books, but she is responsible for the concept of this 4-part series. So huge props to her on writing this.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, so let's move into Trek connections. Did you make any other Trek connections with First Strike?
You think it's all connected somehow?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned earlier, there's a reference to the Horta. There's a reference to Kodos the Executioner. And I believe that's all that I got. The one thing that shocked me is that they didn't directly reference this to Corbomite Maneuver because it really reminded me of the showdown with the First Federation.
Awesome. I got the Horta and the Kodos reference, but other than that, I didn't find anything extra.
Yeah, I kind of like how they kept it that, it could have been anywhere in the TOS timeline. It wasn't, directly tied to any other specific episode. Yeah. So it was good to keep it broad in that sense.
I think that's why it was, because we never actually found out the year, like we mentioned earlier in the show, but that's probably why it ended up being placed in the middle of the 5-year mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very arbitrary. I mean, the only thing that you would have had as a big difference is if, like, Chekhov wasn't there, you would have known it was the first 2 years. Mm-hmm.
All right, so favorite quotes. Other than what we've already read, did you have any other favorite quotes? I've got 2. I actually had to cut my quotes way down this time. There were so many.
Yeah, well, there's one in here that I really liked about women, because Star Trek TOS had its issues as with sexism and everything, and I think this book did it.
What?
Yeah, you weren't aware. There's this little thing called Turnabout Intruder, and like 60 other episodes.
Just to name a few.
Yeah. So, but there's a line in here that I think does good for. It does a good job of repairing the damage of Trek and women, because it talks about McCoy criticizing the way that women were subjugated as witches. So the line is, "The woman's household tools were turned into elements of witchcraft when male physicians wanted to take over the healing arts. Now we have the image of the soot-darkened woman flying on a kitchen utensil and casting spells from a cooking pot. In the same way the horned god's pitchfork, a symbol of male toil, became associated with devils when Christianity moved him out of their way. These things are relatively easy to track." So McCoy's doing a good job of calling out sexism in early humanity at that point.
I think that's why I like this book so much, because it did feel like we were in the future from today's standpoint. Mm-hmm. So, not from the 60s standpoint.
And this book was written in 1995. So this book is 23 years old.
So one of my favorite quotes was about the Fury. Mm-hmm. Saints and demons can be the same depending on whether you approve of their work.
Wow. You can't see this, people listening in, but Marty and I are on video chat, and I'm going to just show him that is the quote that I have right here in my hand, ready as my next one.
Oh my gosh.
Reading Trek Jinx.
You owe me a book.
Yes. The amount of thoughts that are put into this book, the future thoughts, the ideals of Star Trek that are in this book are just so great.
All right, since I stole your next one, do you have any others? And I'm going to talk about these quotes more when we get to Shelvin in a minute.
Okay, yeah. No, here's one that I have, which kind of gets back to what we were talking about, the intensity of that battle early in the book, and how this really gets into the tortures of war, because this time in TOS is kind of a long, not Cold War, but kind of a warm war with the Klingons. They're having these skirmishes, and there's a lot of death and destruction. And they talk about, we talked earlier about McCoy and the morgue, but there's the thing talking about Captain Kirk having to write condolence notes to the families of people lost in battle. And the quote is, "Those awful notes, he'd spend the whole night writing them one by one with hands scratched and sore from today's battle. He had to do them before he slept, or he'd never sleep. He would describe the situation on Capella 4 and explain its importance to the Federation so families would know their young men died for something important. He would log one posthumous commendation after another, feeding them through to Lieutenant Uhura, who would launch the sad package through subspace to the parents, wives, and children of those who'd given their lives today in the line of duty. He was glad he didn't have to write one of those notes to Ambassador Sarek and his wife."
Oh, so beautiful. So incredible.
Now, I look at that in a historical context, because this book would have been written right after the first Gulf War, when I think that was a big deal, when we had, a hot war going on with people dying and bodies coming back to the United States. And I know Star Trek is written for the whole world, but obviously this was written in America, so intense.
Yeah, very intense. So kind of moving into the last part where we talk about morals and messages, I have a quote. "No one is inherently evil. That comes only from the choices we make and the actions we take." And one of the things that I wrote underneath that is, live long and be kind. You don't know what someone's personal struggle is. You don't know what they've been through. A little kindness could go a long way.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that's evident in this book, because Kellen wanted to just go, straight into battle with these people, and Kirk was like, no, let's find out a little bit about them. Like, let's find out why they're here. Like, maybe they don't mean harm and they want to be friends. And I think that kindness went a long way with Zenor,
mm-hmm.
who, was going through this process of having to do something that was against his beliefs.
Yeah, and that actually ties directly into my last quote as well, because I think that's the same message, that there's a point where Zenor is talking to Kirk, and he says, if we can find proof that this isn't our homeland, then my people can begin to live a future rather than endlessly hunt for the past. Which I think really brings down the final message of the book, that you have Starfleet, which is an organization constantly propelling into the future, looking for the utopian sunset, whereas you have these aliens who have spent 5,000 years in a blood vendetta on people who they don't even know, who are a galaxy away. And that just shows you the power of thinking towards the future rather than dwelling.
Yeah, try and see the humanity in things that are scary or different than you. I have written down as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that ties back to what you were just saying.
Yeah. So, overall, what is your takeaway from First Strike?
My big takeaways. I mean, it's beautifully written. There's wonderful McCoy moments, wonderful Spock moments, wonderful Kirk moments. They even gave us some wonderful moments with our foil, the Fury, and the depth of this species is incredible. It's almost as deep, if not more, than white male human we're used to seeing on screen. So yeah, I gave this one, high marks, 4.5 out of 5. Just an incredible page turner, beautifully written. Any one of these quotes that we've written, you could frame and have as an inspirational kind of message.
Yeah, I agree 100%, because when you get back into some of the older Trek literature, like for instance I think second or third episode we did Grounded, and I sadly heard recently that the author of that just passed away, but one of our comments was that it felt very dated. It felt like something that was written in a different time with smaller thinking. This book has the relevancy of today. It has the relevancy of the future. There are arguments to be made in this book that people are making today, and the Me Too movement and other very relevant causes of 2018. I gave this book a Warp 9.0, very high marks as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, that's very high marks for you.
Yeah, again, just like you, page turner. Loved every minute of it. I wish Diane Carey had written the entire series. I'm not knocking the authors because I haven't revisited the other books yet, but I think she really is phenomenal, and I want to go deeper into her Trek catalog. I'm hoping we can get to more of her
Yes, I do
work
as
later.
well. Her amazing writing here. Well, awesome. So high marks on First Strike. Well, before we sneak ahead, did you have anything else you wanted to say about First Strike?
I don't think I have much else to say. It really is. It really is all there, and just top marks. And if you haven't read it yet, you've basically heard everything that's going on from us, but I still encourage you to read it. It doesn't take you that long. I think I did it in about, 5 or 6 hours for the whole book. It's really a great, quick read.
It's an easy read.
All right, so Marty, why don't we talk about the sequel to First Strike that we're going to be covering next?
Yes, what do you hope's going to happen?
Well, we know it's going to be Picard and Riker, so I have a feeling they're going to meet the next wave of Furies, and I imagine they will be technologically advanced just like the Enterprise D, so I'm very curious to see what the new matching of wits will be. Something tells me Picard will not be beaming over to their ship.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think it'll be Riker.
Yeah.
I really want to get a Picard speech. I really want to see him, get into it with the Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Just, they're kind of... I think it's going to be really good, and I'm really excited.
Me too. Yeah, this is going to be great. So let's give them the summary of the next book. So next time on Reading Trek, we will be covering Star Trek: The Next Generation: The Soldiers of Fear by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rausch, Part 2 of the Invasion series. Long ago, before the dawn of civilization, they were banished to the realm of nightmares. Now the terrors are real. A generation ago, another Starship Enterprise fought off a ship of exiled aliens intent on conquering all of the Alpha Quadrant. Starfleet thought the foe had been repelled forever, until now. The Furies have returned in mighty warships, even more powerful than before, but their weapons are more than merely physical, for these aliens are the origins of all the demons and monsters of ancient myth, and they have found a way to project their fears directly into the minds of their enemies. To defeat the Furies and save the Federation, Picard and the crew of the USS Enterprise must first conquer the darkest terrors of their unconscious minds.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be so good. I can't wait. All right, well, we actually have a little bit of fan feedback to get to. So, we got a question asked to us on Twitter by Cathal Fitzgerald. She says, enjoyed your chat on Desperate Hours. Question for you. How important is it that the Star Trek writers view these books as canon? E.g., Burnham has already met Spock. What impact will this have on Star Trek Discovery? I care little for canon. I feel it can be an artificial break on creativity. If I can ask a supplementary question, when does text become canon?
I personally believe that text becomes canon when the show acknowledges it. The show is kind of the final say on things. If you choose to enter the EU, that's your choice, but the only way that you can kind of first and foremost get into Star Trek is by watching it. So I've never met somebody who's just read the Star Trek books and never seen the Star Trek series. So I think you kind of have to let the show lead the way on that. But it's also what you enjoy. Make your own decisions. Don't let other people bother you on it. The only place where I'm not a fan of it is when one contradicts the other in a certain basis. Like, for instance, we read a whole book about Kodos, the Executioner, and he was Adrian Kodos in that, and then in another book we read it, and he was like Adam Kodos. So there's as long as you can keep the facts straight, I don't think that the minutia matters as much. How about you, Marty?
Yeah, I agree. I think that same with you. Books become canon when the show acknowledges it. Getting back to the main question about Discovery, I think that because those authors are working so closely with the writers in developing these novels, that not necessarily that the show is incorporating the books, but the books are incorporating things from the show that are so recent. Mm-hmm. Although it does happen to work in reverse, like with Desperate Hours. They took the character bios that David Mack had written. They took Burnham's speech, almost straight out of that book, mm-hmm. or vice versa. It could have been vice versa on that one, actually. But I don't think we should worry too much about the book continuing to follow, or the series continuing to follow the book as it has. But who knows? I mean, I would love it if we got a little reference to the events of Desperate Hours in Season 2. I don't think it'll happen, but it would be really cool. At least they should acknowledge that Spock and Michael aren't complete strangers.
Well, yeah, because she has referenced him several times in the show when talking to Sarek. She's talked about, you liked Spock more than me, da-da-da-da. But, the Desperate Hours was set, I believe, a year prior to Battle for the Binary Stars. And then by the end of the events of Season 1 of Discovery, I think a year had gone by because it had been 3 months, plus then they jumped 9 months in time. So it would be interesting to have Burnham say, Spock, I haven't seen you in 2 years now, or something like that. Something very similar.
Yeah. I certainly hope they don't make Burnham a stranger to the Enterprise, because she's seen it before.
It could be any side of the spectrum. It could be, I saw you 2 years ago, Spock, or it could be, hey, remember 2 years ago when you met up with the Shenzhou and we defeated that haptic feedback together?
That's what I don't think will happen.
I highly doubt that as well.
Thank you so much again for your question. Please don't feel free to send in more questions. We love interacting with our listeners.
Yes, indeed. And one more thing of note in Trek book news, because I'm not going to step on the toes of any other Trek news services, but specifically relating to books, we recently got the cover art announced for Fear Itself, which is the Star Trek Discovery Saru-centric novel that's going to be coming out in June, and our good friend Heather is going to be joining us again when we cover that. So we're very excited to get to see Saru's origin story in that book.
Oh, yes, we certainly are. I can't wait.
You can pre-order it now on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
All right, again, we'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to reach us on Twitter, you can do that with @ReadingTrek. That's where we're found there. We're also on Facebook at ReadingTrek Podcast, I believe. You can also reach us by email, readingtrekpodcast@gmail.com. And as Will said, you can leave us a voicemail up to 2 minutes at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. Be sure to leave your name when you call, and you'll be entered into that contest to win the hardbound copy of the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard by David A. Goodman. As always, links to our upcoming selections can be found on our webpage at readingtrek.thetricordertransmissions.com.
And Marty, where can people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you directly about this?
Personally, I would be at Time Travel Marty on Twitter, and you can also find me cruising around in the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook. And Will, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at William G. Conlon, or you can find me in the unofficial Star Trek Facebook group as well. Things are starting to heat up in there as we are about 4 months away from Star Trek Las Vegas. It is ground central for Star Trek fans everywhere, and a great place for you to pick up those long out-of-print Star Trek paperback novels, so you can follow along with us when we start getting into the really old-school stuff. So, please be a part of the program. We want to get guests in here. If you're planning on reading any of our upcoming books, let us know in advance, and maybe we can have you on the show to talk about your thoughts about it as well.
That'd be super fun. I'd like that a lot.
And with that, Captain Picard wants us to let him read in peace.
I will leave you now to your book.
That is all I ask.
No, I'm kind of digging at them right now, too, so I don't know.
Now we won't ever be sponsored by Eagle Moss. Way to go, Will.
Wah, wah, wah. Hey, if Eagle Moss has a problem with me, they can look at the shelf full of their ships that I own, and then they probably
They
won't have
can
a
look at the
problem with me.
Shenzhou I'm petting right now.
Oh, I still haven't seen that in person. Oh, I can't
It's
wait.
beautiful. I've got it right here.
Nice.
You can't see this because we're
Nice.
not a video podcast.
Hi.
You know I don't talk to our Patreon supporters while you're gone.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
No, I didn't.
It's a good thing I have my
they're
own.
Getting,
It's a good
they're
thing I have
getting
my
5
own feed.
minutes of straight silence is what they're getting.
Oh, hey, Jim Morehouse doesn't give you
Well,
that kind of quality.
yeah, I mean, it won't be total silence. They'll hear like my chair creaking and a motorcycle driving by.
Yeah. It's like an Andy Warhol movie. Have you ever heard of Empire?
No. And then you stay because you're like, no. You would stay because then you're just like, no. If I leave now, something's gonna happen. I'll go to the restroom, and I'll have missed it.